everybody, so I am Sascha of the Wire String Duo, and I just wanted to explain a couple of the techniques that we use in our winter CD and sheet music. So one of the things that I do in several of the pieces is called the chop, and if you haven't chopped before, it's super fun. It makes your cello into a percussive instrument instead of just a melodic one. So it uses a little bit of a different technique. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bow and I am going to straighten out my thumb. So this is probably the only time in life that you're going to want a straight thumb. And I'm going to straighten that thumb, and I'm going to turn the bow further away from me. So I'm going to make the hair a little bit look towards the floor. So I'm pushing the bow away from me, and that's going to make this really hard-hitting sound. So the chop is kind of a combination of two things. It's kind of a combination of an aggressive hit. Again, I have a straighter thumb than I would normally have, and a little bit of a more open elbow. The other thing that it incorporates is a little bit of a scraping sound. So I'm not doing that very far. That's where kind of that aggressive feeling comes from. I'm also going to be super, super close to the frog. So I'm hanging out there. And what we also need is a lot of rosin. So make sure you really have rosin in your bow. And again, I'm coming down, and it's a quick motion. So I'm not letting it scrape for a long time. That's a kind of a different situation. But I'm staying super close to the frog, and I'm coming down with a pretty flat wrist. A lot of the times in music, we want to have a lot of flexibility in our wrist. And in this case, we want to keep our wrist a little bit more rigid so that it stops that bow from going anywhere. So I'm using a lot of aggressive motion, but I'm halting the motion once I get there. So I'm, again, my bow is a little bit angled away from me, and I'm closer to the bridge than I would normally be. So if I'm playing normally, I move the bow down closer to the bridge and a little bit angled towards the floor than I would normally do. So like in We Wish You a Merry Christmas, what I do is I alternate between regular playing and going into this chopping technique. I'd recommend checking out there's a lot of other chopping videos available on YouTube that get into it a little bit more. There's one from Natalie Haas. I think there's one from Rushad Eggleston, who's the king of chopping, if you have further questions about it. But I'm alternating between regular playing and chopping. And usually if I'm doing a chopping technique, I keep my thumb pretty straight for the entire time. And I'm going back and forth between a middle lane, if you think of these as lanes, a middle section of in between the bottom of my fingerboard and my bridge, and way closer to the bridge. So this is what it'll sound like as I'm moving back and forth. The other thing that we want to make sure that we're not worried about is the note after the chop sort of makes a sound, but it sort of doesn't. And what we would call that is a ghost note. So don't worry about going like a real sound for the note after the chop. It kind of has a semblance of the pitch, but most of it almost sounds like a second chop because you're releasing your bow from the string. I use two other non-traditional techniques when I am playing our pieces on winter. And one of them is happens in Greensleeves, and it's just a finger strum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play my lower fingers, my lower strings. I'm going to use my thumb to pitch those and alternate with, I use my second finger, or I guess my third finger, my bad finger, to move back and forth so I don't have to, I'm not frantically trying to get to both my upper and lower strings with one finger. So I would get comfortable with playing on the lower two strings with plucking away from myself with my thumb, and then on the upper two strings I'm plucking, I think, towards myself with my second finger, or you can use your third or second, either one. I happen to like my third, my bad finger. technique, and it's in We Wish You a Merry Christmas. I happen to do this with my bow down, and there's a specific spot where I tell you to put your bow down, so I do that. But all it is a fingerboard slap. So I'm gonna be plucking as normal, and just in the middle of it, I'm gonna hit my fingerboard with my right hand. And again, I use that same strumming method so that I'm not thinking that's just too much for your hand to do. So I'm using my thumb and my third finger often to pits between the upper and lower strings. And I just throw a slap. So I'm just gonna hit the strings right where I would normally be pitsing. And it kind of creates, I'm hitting those strings against the fingerboard, kind of creates this tasty slap. So hope that helps you, and hope that you have fun working on Winter.